there's value to listening to people, to drawing out, asking questions about life and about, things that are motivating them, whatever it may be.
Well, listening tells somebody that you see them.
That's right. And it's you've said this many times, Chad, to listen is to love. And the command is love God, love people. And so listening, asking questions. He invites them on a journey. He spends time with them. And then he does a lot of come and see. Hey, where are you going? Hey, come and see. Invitations. So he sees people. He asks questions. He loves them by listening. He gets to know them by spending time with them. And then he invites them. Hey, come on the journey. Come and see.
Welcome to the Loving God, Loving People podcast, where we talk about what it looks like to follow Jesus in our everyday lives and how, in the end, all that matters is God and people. Here's today's episode.
Well, hey, everyone. Welcome to the podcast. Today, we are continuing as we've been going through Mark and the life of Jesus, and Mark's account as really he's writing down everything that Peter's telling him. Today, we're talking about the calling of the disciples. And I love Mark's account because he takes what, if you look at like Matthew, Luke, and John, what takes place over a couple days, Mark compresses it into like 2 sentences.
Mark's like a sports writer for the newspaper.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the Dallas Cowboys lost.
Final score.
Dak Prescott, yeah, he could have been better. And that's it.
Yep.
He just kind of goes bam, bam, bam.
Yeah.
And that's what you get in the book of Mark.
So one of the things is I was studying Mark in preparation for this series.
I feel
and,
like
and
I threw
specifically,
Dak Prescott under the bus there. So,
hey, Dak,
sorry,
if you're
sorry
listening,
about that,
man,
Dak.
we love you. Yeah, you're great. Okay.
Yeah. We all saw the game, but we love you.
And also, Dak, if you could like, subscribe, share this with your friends on social media. If this podcast is helpful, that'd be great. Okay.
Let's talk about the book of Mark, the gospel of Jesus, according to Mark, the calling of the first disciples. Sorry, Robert, I went somewhere else.
Yep. And then somehow Peter's involved in all that too. So it's the
Well, most
gospel
likely-
of Jesus. Yep.
Yeah, most likely Mark is Peter's secretary, and he's writing these things down.
All right, so this isn't where we went with the message, but I do want to talk about this because I find this fascinating. So you have Peter and you have Mark, who are friends. Both of them have some things in common. So Peter, he failed miserably when it came time to back up Jesus, and he's like, we'll fight to the death. And then this girl's like, hey, weren't you with Jesus when he's on trial? And he's like, no, I have no idea who you're talking about.
A junior high girl
Yeah.
talks Peter out of that real quick.
Yeah, so he denies Jesus 3 times, but then Jesus, the way he restores Peter, it's beautiful, where he says, hey, do you love me? And it's after the resurrection, and he restores Peter into ministry and is like, hey, just keep doing what I called you to do.
Yeah.
Then you have John Mark, who's on this missionary journey with Barnabas and with Paul, and he chickens out, and he goes, you know what, this is getting a little tough. I'm going to go back home. And he abandons them on the mission field. And eventually he ends up getting restored. Barnabas kind of goes to bat for him. And
all that's in the book of Acts.
yeah, so given a lot of kind of just Bible background here. But I love that the two of them are friends. And I love that the story is the same. And I think it's a testament for all of us if ever you felt like maybe I'm disqualified.
Yeah.
Maybe I've done something that I can't do ministry, or I can't, whatever happened in my life. So now I need to just kind of take a back seat. That's not how God sees you, and that's not the redemptive story of the Bible or those that encounter Jesus. You're about to say something.
Well, I just want to say that I'm really grateful that God's not into cancel culture.
Yeah.
Because reality is all the patriarchs,
Mm-hmm.
right? All the men and women in the Bible have failures.
Mm-hmm.
There's not anybody. We don't read anything bad about Jesus' mom, right?
Mm-hmm.
She was a sinner because she's natural born like the rest of us. So I guess Jesus didn't want anything written bad about his mom.
Mm-hmm.
But just about everybody else,
Yeah.
You got all the gory details.
We were talking about this earlier too. It's a testament to the authenticity of the Bible that those who are actually recording it are like, yeah, I messed up.
Oh, yeah.
I
Well,
failed.
Well, if I'm writing down my story,
Mm-hmm.
right, I don't want to put in there that I denied Jesus 3 times
Mm-hmm.
or said stupid things constantly, and Jesus looked at me and went, "Are you still so dull?"
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But all through the Bible, Moses was going to wimp out,
Mm-hmm.
disobeyed God on several occasions. David is an adulterer, right? Moses was a murderer. You got stuff all the way through the Scripture. Yeah, to your point, it's because it's real, and people are messed up, and we all need Jesus.
Yeah, and there could have been filters put on all that, but I love that as the Holy Spirit guided people to write, it's like, no, keep that in there. That's going to be helpful for future generations to know that, it's okay that you're not perfect, and there is one who is.
Well, I was just trying to think, is there anybody besides Mary that we don't know the not so great stuff? And then I was thinking John the Baptist, and then I was like, no, wait a minute, John the Baptist really doubted, right?
Yeah, he had that moment.
Jesus was like, don't worry, it's legit. So yeah, I mean, the majority of folks written about in the Bible, you get the negative stuff.
Yeah, unless it was a really short account of somebody. There's just a couple verses, and it's like, all right, they sounded pretty good, but not all the details were given. All right, so one of the things that stood out to me as I was looking at Mark and looking at Jesus calling the disciples, at the end of Jesus' ministry, so you have the resurrection, he's about to ascend into heaven, everything that he's been training these disciples, and disciple is a word we don't really use. It's think like student, apprentice, disciple. At the end of this discipleship journey, now Jesus is saying, hey, by the way, it's going to continue. I'm going to send a helper. I'm going to keep walking alongside you, but go and make other disciples. And so our race of, the Bible uses that analogy of a race. It's a relay race that we're to take our faith that we've experienced, that we've seen the fruit of, and we're to pass it on to others. And so I started thinking, okay, how did Jesus call his disciples? If we're to help people become disciples, what did Jesus do? Because he knows what he's doing. Jesus is brilliant. And you see some things in the accounts, in the gospel accounts of how Jesus calls his disciples. And one of the things that stood out to me is it says over and over again that Jesus saw them. So John the Baptist says, hey, you got to follow this guy. He's the Lamb of God, takes away the sin of the world. So these guys start following him. It says Jesus turned around and he saw them. He saw Peter. He saw Nathanael sitting under a fig tree. And again, you see that phrase that he saw them. And it just stood out to me that we serve God who sees us, which is different than some people's view of God.
Yeah.
They don't think that really God sees them. God really knows them. God really understands. There's even this moment in the Old Testament where you have Hannah, and she's in the wilderness, and she's like, I'm going to die. My baby's going to die. Not Hannah. Oh, man. It'll come to me. Anyhow, and she says, hey, God sees me, and she gives him the name, the God who... Hagar, thank you, who sees me.
Took me a second. I was rolling.
I know, yeah. I was like, Hannah.
Okay.
No, that's not right.
That's
Hagar. And Hagar gives God that name, the God who sees me. So all throughout the Old Testament, all throughout the New Testament, God sees us. Chad, what is the significance of that for an individual listening going, okay, maybe God's this idea or this concept or this spirit somewhere out there, but that God actually sees us as individuals?
Yeah. So one of the things that I've been trying to hammer home in recent days is that God is highly relational, right? I mean, a couple of weeks ago we talked about the baptism of Jesus. I mean, that's the revealing that God is Trinity and the essence of who and what he is. He is relational. And so God seeing us is a relational thing.
Yeah.
In Psalm 139, it says that God thinks about us more than there are grains of sand. Well, how many grains of sand are there?
Yeah.
Right? If you go to the beach and just scoop up a shovelful, there's millions and millions. God is not like us. He's infinite in every way. And so if you take what the scriptures say, that means you are infinitely on his mind.
Yeah.
Because the number of grains of sand on this planet are in the realm of infinite, right? God's highly relational. I would say for somebody who's questioning or thinking that you're not an accident, there are accidental parents, but the Bible says there's no accidental children. No matter how you came to be or what your story is, God himself knit you together in your mother's womb. That's in Psalm 139. And he knows who you are, and you're on his mind, and he loves you. I mean, God is hyper relational, and I think we tend to have religious thoughts, not relational thoughts, and in that we miss the truth of what the Bible's actually saying. So yeah, Jesus sees them, and the truth is he's seen them for all eternity before they were ever born. God made flesh, knew who Peter was, knew who Andrew was, knew the story, right, before it ever came to be. And so I always wonder, and I love that you notice that detail, right? Mark, who's not detail oriented, obviously chose to write he saw them because that's an important detail. I wonder when he saw them what he thought.
Yeah.
Because he is human and he's also divine, and you wonder what's going on in the mind of the God-man, right? I mean, did he see them and go, oh, here it is, right? Here's the moment. Did he see them in the sense of all of their life up to that moment? Because he can do that, right? He saw their birth. He sees them as a toddler. Now he sees them fishing. Does he see Peter in his future?
Yeah.
Does he see Peter in that moment deny him 3 times? I don't know. Maybe.
Does he see Peter being hung on a cross for his faith in Jesus and declaring it? Does he see
Upside
all of it?
down? Yeah. Church tradition is Peter was crucified and didn't believe himself worthy to die the way that Jesus did, and so they hung him upside down. Yeah.
Here's what I do know.
Jesus saw them.
He saw them differently than they saw themselves, and then others saw them. If you look at the resume of the disciples that Jesus called, if you and I were to, sit in an office and we were to whiteboard out like, okay, what kind of structure do we want? What kind of gifting and leadership and all of that? We wouldn't go, hey, let's start with a bunch of fishermen in rural Galilee. Let's start. Let that be the first kind of initial one, and let's get this tax collector and let's get this zealot over here, and let's put them all together. But Jesus saw them, and he saw them differently than society saw them. He saw them differently than I believe they saw themselves. He saw deeper than labels. He saw deeper than what's on the surface. Because if we said rural fishermen, that probably wouldn't be the label that we would go with, right?
Yeah.
If we're building our dream team of apprentices that are going to carry on whatever vision. But Jesus saw them, and he saw them deeper than they saw themselves. There's this beautiful realization, too, because in culture and society, we have a tendency to kind of put labels on people, right? And go, wow, that person's amazing because they're the, CEO, or wow, this person is a star athlete and that's incredible. And then there's other people that you go, man, it's really tough life, or, they're, maybe not that wealthy or whatever. And you kind of go, okay, they're maybe like this. I'm intimidated by this person over here. And then you get to know people. And you get to know the star athlete, or you get to know the CEO, you get to know, or you get to know the person who's maybe just had a really rough run at life. And as you really get to know people, not just on the surface and the labels, but you actually get to know who they are and what makes them tick and kind of what drives them. And you realize they're all people.
It's always disappointing.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, the old statement is, you never want to meet your heroes.
Yeah.
Right. And I can tell you, as somebody who's met their heroes, that's true.
Yeah.
It's going to sound like I'm going off track here, but
No,
I'm not. I'm going to bring it back.
Yep.
I was talking to a friend yesterday, and one of the truths of life that has been sinking in with me recently is, and let me get it all the way out,
Yep.
how deeply insignificant I am. And let me get it all out, because I'm not insecure. I don't have self-esteem issues. I probably do, but not in this context. How deeply insignificant we all are, because, okay, so I'll use myself. I'll just be the guinea pig in what I'm going to say here. So, you and I, Robert, get to pastor this wonderful church. There's lots of people and all of that. So somebody might go, oh, no, Robert, you're a big deal. Chad, you're a big deal, or whatever. But here's the truth. One of these days I'm going to die. And about as fast as I can pull my hand out of a bucket of water, right? What happens to that water? It didn't change. It just kind of went around me for a little bit, and then it goes right back to where it was. And then somebody else is going to put their hand in. And, the cemetery, right, like, what are you talking about? Here's what I mean. Everybody's replaceable. The cemetery is full of people that were, quote, irreplaceable, and they've been replaced.
And here we are.
Yeah. Hopefully, whatever God does in my life, I'm going to die, and then the music's going to go on, right? And somebody else will come and play, and all of that. But me, as far as a person, I'm deeply, I'm insignificant. My life's a vapor. I'm going to be here and gone. The book of Ecclesiastes says the best I could do, right, is to honor God and love my family well.
Yeah.
And be faithful with whatever God has given me and enjoy the work of my hands, right? But at the same time, in all of my deep insignificance when it comes to the world at large, in history and all those things, and will I be remembered and all that. I'm highly valued and loved.
Yeah.
And God thinks about me more than there are grains of sand.
Yep.
And I'm very special to him. And so, one day I'll be done at Sun Valley and everybody will remember me for about 3 weeks. And then whoever's leading then is going to be the leader. And, I'll have an identity crisis. But the truth is, I'm deeply insignificant and yet highly valued.
Yes.
And I think there's really healthy
there's so much
really
truth
healthy
behind
fruit
that.
there
Yeah.
when we understand the tension of those two things.
Yeah.
Because we're all trying to prove ourselves and all of that. I'll just help you from a worldly perspective. You're never going to prove yourself. You're just not. There's not going to be enough achievement or enough success or enough money or whatever that you're like, I've arrived. And that feeling's just going to stay there. So we want to find our significance not in the worldly side of it because we're all deeply insignificant. But
Yeah, 200 years from now, nobody's going to be going back and looking at your Instagram. I'm sorry, but
or listening to this podcast.
We're listening to the podcast. Yeah, there's a lot of things that we think, it's a big deal in the moment, and I don't want to downplay that. But yeah, in the grand scheme of life, not really. And so, but there's a healthy perspective to that.
So you find your value and your identity and your significance in the one who loves you and will forever. So I kind of went off there and came back. But you think about Peter and you think about resume and all that because God doesn't give a flying flip about that stuff.
Yeah.
It's the touch of the master's hand that makes a masterpiece out of somebody.
Yep.
And that's what he does with the disciples.
Yeah.
If you're from a Catholic background, a fisherman is the first pope. Right? In your mind and in your tradition. If you're like Sun Valley, you're from a Protestant background. I mean, the church began with this guy's sermon, and he was a fisherman.
Yeah.
Right? So,
and to your point, it wasn't because there was all of these great qualities that he had. God used Peter in such a way, and to your point, the impact of Jesus in Peter's life forever transformed his life. And it changed the trajectory of his life. He says, hey, you've been fishing for fish. Now I want you to fish for men. Now I want you to be a part of what I'm doing in the grand scheme of eternity, which then makes his life incredibly significant. And here we are 2,000 years later talking about him and picking apart, all the things that he said. And wow, why did he say that? And that doesn't, it's because of what Jesus did in his life. And yeah.
Well, here's what I love about Peter in this tension. Right. So Peter's an old man. He's telling Mark what went down. Mark's writing it down. Mark's full of dumb stuff Peter did, the book of Mark, which means that Peter got to a place in his life where it's not about Peter.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
Man, that's such a great place to be.
Yeah.
It's just the healthy reality of your insignificance in the scheme of things and yet the hand of God on your life. That is such a beautiful place to be.
All the labels we want to build up for ourselves or that we want to put other people under, at the end of the day, everybody's human. And at the depth of who we are, there's a desire to be seen. There's a desire to be known, and there's a desire to be valued and loved, to your point. And that's true of everybody, no matter what their status, title, label, whatever is. And what I love about Jesus, what I love about God and how he interacts with us in the relational side is he sees each individual and he values each individual, values the price somebody's willing to pay for something, and he's given his one and only son for you and for me. He values you incredibly, and he loves you more than anybody can ever, will ever love you. He loves you. That's a beautiful reality, and every single person on this planet is better off knowing that there's a God who loves them. And if we can be a part of helping, just like Peter, hey, I'm going to use my life now to fish for men. I'm going to use my life to help make disciples. I'm going to be a part of what God is doing. The world's a better place.
And on the inside of us, right? Maybe I'll be valuable if I get this many Instagram followers. Maybe I'll be valuable if my net worth gets to here. Maybe I'll be valuable if my kid turns out this way instead of this way. Maybe I'll be valuable if I get that raise or that job or that whatever. And we're all playing marbles, right, with these diamonds that God's given us. God doesn't want us to do things to get value. He wants us to do things out of the value that we already have in him.
That's right.
And the more we can learn that, the healthier that is. I love that you saw the Sodom. I think that's so good, Robert. And he does see us, and he sees you, and he loves us, which is mind-blowing.
So I started by talking about, so Jesus gives this command to the disciples, hey, go and make disciples. And they've passed this baton. And now here we are. And if you're here listening and you're a follower of Jesus, you're holding that baton to pass. Just a couple things that I noticed that Jesus does, because I think we should learn from his example, because we way overcomplicate. How do we make disciples? And, what material do we need to teach them? And what's, do we create a class? How do we do this? Here's what Jesus does. I'm going to rattle them off quickly. First, he sees people. He sees past the labels. He sees people. And then he asks questions. Jesus asks way more questions than he gives answers. He's drawing them in. He's asking them questions, beginning with like, hey, what are you doing? Like, they're following Jesus, and he's like, what's going on? Like, what do you want? And he's asking these questions, but he often leads with questions. And when people ask him questions, he asks questions. There's value to listening to people, to drawing out, asking questions about life and about, things that are motivating them, whatever it may be.
Well, listening tells somebody that you see them.
That's right. And it's you've said this many times, Chad, to listen is to love. And the command is love God, love people. And so listening, asking questions. He invites them on a journey. He spends time with them. And then he does a lot of come and see. Hey, where are you going? Hey, come and see. Invitations. So he sees people. He asks questions. He loves them by listening. He gets to know them by spending time with them. And then he invites them. Hey, come on the journey. Come and see. Could it be that this God that I've been following loves you, sees you, and you can experience that love? Maybe come to church. Maybe come check out, lots of different opportunities to invite people to things. That's what Jesus did with the disciples. And then he says, now you go make disciples. And I think there's something too, following that example that Jesus set for us.
Well, one of the things that I love about your ministry, and for those of you who don't know, Robert oversees all of our Next Gen ministry at Sun Valley. So all campuses, kids and students. Mm-hmm. Robert leads the charge on that. Is when an adult, in an appropriate, really healthy way, sees a teenager mm-hmm. and speaks life into them, mm-hmm. that is life-changing.
Yeah.
You and I are both sitting right here mm-hmm. doing this podcast right now.
Somebody saw us.
Because some adult, mm-hmm. When we were junior hires and high schoolers, saw us. Mm-hmm. And invested in us.
And maybe saw something in us that we didn't know and maybe they didn't even know what it was, but they valued us.
They went through the list you just went to. Mm-hmm. They saw us, they listened to us mm-hmm. and all our stupidity, right? Mm-hmm. They invited us to go on the journey with them. Mm-hmm. And as a result, you and I are sitting here.
Yeah.
If you and I will invest our lives in what matters most, I think to your point, if we will see people, mm-hmm. right, the way that God sees them, and mm-hmm. that's one of the things I was talking about in the realm of temptation, but it's actually in every area of life. If we could see what God sees, we would always do what God says. And one of the prayers maybe we could pray is help us, God, to see people the way that you see them. Mm-hmm. But some of us, man, we could take a step to invest ourselves in the lives of kids and teenagers. Mm-hmm. And it's just a relational investment. Yep. Man, it would change everything for that kid.
Yeah, our vision for kids this year is that every kid would be known. And the way that happens is, to your point, adults, older, we have students that serve with kids and all of that, seeing kids and getting to know them, asking them questions. It really is simple, but at the same time, very profound and very beautiful and powerful. And so, yeah, sending a bunch of kids to camp, looking for leaders that love kids, love students. We'll see them, get to know them, and we're going to continue the ministry of Jesus in our kids and student ministries.
Yeah, he saw them. Mm-hmm. That's powerful.
Thanks for watching this week's episode of the Loving God, Loving People podcast. Make sure you subscribe to this channel and click the bell so that you'll never miss an episode. And while you're at it, if you found value in this conversation, we'd love it if you would like this video, leave us a comment, and even share it with a friend. Doing that will help more people meet, know, and follow Jesus. And lastly, you are always welcome to join us each week for one of our services right here live on YouTube. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.